What's up, guys? I'm back with another Would You Rather video where I'm going to give you two positions and you have to decide if you'd rather play white in the first position or if you'd rather play white in the second position. Now, it's white to play in both of these positions. As you can see, they're both rook endgames. And go ahead and pause if you'd like and figure out which position do you think white has the better chances. That could be chances to win, could be chances to draw. I'm not going to spoil it, but go ahead and pause, think that through that. And once you're ready, we'll go ahead and talk about each of these positions and see what's going on. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about these positions. And this is position number one, and here's position number two. And actually the correct answer, or the position that you should have chosen, was position number two. Now, this is the position where white has, not has winning chances, white is winning in this position with correct play. And if we go back to position number one, white is not winning, but actually black has a way that they can get a draw. So, and this is kind of counterintuitive to the general principle. If you've watched any of my videos on rook endings or some of the other endgame videos, I've mentioned that normally speaking, two pawns on the 6th rank will beat a rook. Okay, so in this case, it's white to play. We can actually play b6, protect the pawn on a7, and we actually have not only two pawns on the 6th, we even have one of them advanced to the 7th, right? And so, like I said, normally this is going to beat the rook. Okay, and if we go back to this position, position number two, black has the same thing going on here. Two pawns on the 6th rank or the 3rd rank if you're black. Again, this is supposed to beat the rook. That's the general rule, and most of the time that is true. But both of these positions actually have some little tricks going on that make those rules not quite true. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with this position and try to understand what's going on. First of all, white is threatening to win the game by playing b7 next and having both pawns here. So for example, if black plays just a random sort of useless move like king here, white's going to simply play b7, and both of the pawns are threatening to get a queen. Yes, the rook can capture one, but now white gets a queen, and if this is really good because it's a fork, but even if it wasn't, queen is going to win against a rook with perfect play, right? So that's a win for white. Okay, so that's the threat that white has, right? So black has to do something pretty immediate, okay? Because like I said, random move, and this is happening. So what can black play? King to c3. This is actually the only move. And you should notice that black is threatening to simply checkmate white. So if we go with this b7 pawn, game is over, now we lose. Okay, so pretty obvious, it's checkmate threat. What can we do? Well, we can't move either of the pawns, so we have to move our king. So let's say, first of all, that we try to move this way. Well, now black is going to simply play king to d3, and we have the same threat. And again, we have to move our king. And I think you can see that if we keep moving, black can keep moving, right? And it doesn't really matter where we move to. Black's just going to mirror our king, always threatening checkmate. Okay, so let's go back. And from the start here, it makes sense then that we don't really want to run this way because we know what black's going to do, and it's going to be a draw, right? We're trying to win. So to try to win, we run this way. And now black can't really do the same thing because this isn't threatening checkmate, right? Because our king is close enough to the rook that we can just take it. So we've prevented this sort of king mirroring idea, right? So what can black play in this position if they can't do that? I invite you to pause if you'd like and try to think through what do you think the move is for black that actually draws the game. Well, if you had a chance to look through that, there's actually 3 moves and they all kind of have the same idea. So if you said rook to a4, rook to a5, or rook to a6, any of those moves would draw the game. And they all, like I said, they all have the same idea. So we're going to go with rook a4 just for the sake of this example, but remember, same concepts apply if the rook was there too. So first of all, what's going on? Well, white has to make a decision about what move they're going to play. We can't move our king anywhere except here. And do we want to move our king here? Well, no, we get checkmated. So basically that means we can't move our king. We don't want to move this pawn because the rook's just going to take it. We lose our pawn, then we're going to lose the game, which means we only have one move to play, b7, right? So that's kind of the idea of what black is trying to do here, setting up this little, it's kind of like a zugzwang where we do have a move, but we can't move our king. Okay, so we have to play b7, which is kind of what we wanted to play anyway, right? Now we've got our threat. Either of these pawns is going to become a queen unless black can figure out a way to stop it. Of course, taking here doesn't work. We simply get the queen and like I mentioned, white's going to be able to win. So if you'd like to pause again and think through, what do you think black should play here? And if you said rook to b4 check, you are correct. This is really the only move that makes sense, because if black does anything else, white's just going to get a queen. There's no way to really threaten checkmate. This doesn't threaten checkmate because the rook can't go there. And so black has to play this check. Okay, now if we're white, we don't want to move here or here, because then black's just going to put us in check and we have to go back, right? And that didn't really help us. Every time we do that, he's just going to go check. We have to go back, which means we have to go this way. So king c1. And now this is kind of the tricky moment in this study. What move can black play? And there's only one move that draws the game. What do you think it is? If you had a chance to look at that, the move that black needs to play is rook to h4. And that is the only move that draws. And when I first saw this, I was surprised, because I thought, okay, yeah, I get the idea. You want to come way over here and threaten checkmate. But the part that confused me was, why does it have to be h4? Why can't this move or this move or this move? Why don't those work? Because they all threaten checkmate, but only this one draws the position. And real quick, of course, if you take this, white gets the queen. If you go here, white gets the queen or gets the queen, and then one of those queens can help prevent the checkmate. So that's why this doesn't work. So only move, rook to h4. And I think the best way to learn this is to start with rook h4. We'll see how this is a draw, and then we'll come back and talk about why these moves don't work. Okay, so rook to h4. Obviously, black is threatening checkmate. So even if we get a queen here, we get checkmated. Or if we get a queen here, right, we get checkmated. Okay, pretty straightforward. We have to do something with our king, either here or here. Now, if we go this way, black can just come back here again, right? And we have the same problem of if we go here, and of course, just he's going to keep checking us, we have to go back. So that doesn't really accomplish anything. The only way we can accomplish something is by running this way and eventually going for the rook, right? So over here, black's going to have to move here. And again, if we come back, same thing, right? So we're going to keep running this way. Black's going to keep threatening the checkmate, right? We're going to keep running. Black's going to keep threatening the checkmate. And finally, it looks like we've done it. We play king to g1, and it looks like black can't threaten the checkmate anymore, and we've probably are going to win. But black has another trick, and again, I invite you to pause. This one shouldn't be too difficult if you remember what we talked about previously, but go ahead. What does black play here? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is rook to g4 check. And it's the same idea that we saw over here on the other side of the board when the king was on c3, except now it's on f3. And again, we have the problem of if we go here, we're just put in check again, and we have to go back, and we can't get out of it. And if we go here, guess what? Rook h4 again, threatening checkmate. Again, same thing. The king follows us if we go this way, and there's always this check. Okay, so now that we understand how black can draw, let's go back. Let me go all the way back here. Remember I said this was the only move. So now you should probably be able to understand, why doesn't this move draw the game as well? So go ahead and think through that. When you think you've figured that out, I'll show you the answer. All right, well, if you've had a chance to look at that, it has to do with the fact that we allow white's king an extra file, which we didn't want to do, right? So for example, king goes here, king goes here, king goes here. Remember, the last time we wanted to play check and force the king back. But now, if we do that, guess what? The king is going to get away and come over here. Attacks our rook, and now we lose because there's going to be a queen next, and we can't do anything about it. So compare that to, if I go to, let's see, which position was it? This position, check. We go here, check. Notice we ran out of board. We can't go over here, to the I. There's no I file, right, where our king can go to. So we're just stuck. So that's the idea. That's why rook h4 was the only way to draw. Pretty amazing. Even though you have your pawns so far advanced, black has this trap where they just keep the king on either c3 or f3, follow your king, and using the rook and checking in just the right way, you can't get out of it. Okay, so that's why we couldn't win. This was a draw. Now let's compare that to this position. And again, we see the two pawns ready to go, but this time we have the rook. Now it's a little bit of a different position, but we have the rook and we are trying to win. So if you want to pause and think a little bit, what do you think white's approach should be in this position? And then we will talk about it in just a second. All All right, well, hopefully you had a chance to look at that and you have an idea. Let's go ahead and see if you were right. So first of all, if white just tries to do some move like this, rook behind the pawn, right? This is kind of the general idea of why, normally speaking, the pawns will win, because you just push one, and after the rook takes, the other one gets a queen, right? You can't really stop them by going behind with your rook like that, okay? So because of that, white has to come up with some other plan. And same thing here, if you just go for this, well, again, black's just going to push a pawn and then get a queen, right? Okay, I think that's pretty straightforward. So what do we need to do instead? Obviously, the king is too far to catch those, right? It's going to take several moves for the king to get there, and the pawn only needs 2. So you can't really move your king. You have to do a check with your rook. And the only move is rook to d2 check. Now, first thing to notice, if the king moves up, what are we going to do? That's right, we're going to play check here and fork these pieces, and then after we take this one, we can just stop this guy. Easy win. Okay, so because of that, going back here, black doesn't want to go up. They will have to go back to one of these squares. Now, if they go to a1, this is the worst option for black. We have a very easy win. If you'd like to pause and think through this one, what can we play here to win very easily? Well, if you said king to b3, you are correct. We're basically trapping the king in the corner, and we're going to get checkmate next move, regardless of, yes, black can push a pawn, or black could even move the king. It doesn't matter. Checkmate is coming, and black can't stop it. Okay, so what does that mean? It means black can't go here, has to go to b1. All right, now, we could try the same thing, king to b3, going for checkmate. The problem is that then black slides the king over, and what do we do now? We don't really have any good moves. We can throw in a check, black just simply slides the king over, and now we're out of moves, and black's going to be pushing the pawns next, and we're in trouble. So what should we play in this position? If you want to pause, there's only one move that wins the game for white. You had a chance to look at that. The move is king to c3. Now, why is this so important? Well, there's a little trick that we have to understand. So first of all, let's start with the obvious. What happens if black pushes the pawn? They're not in check. There's no checkmate threat. It seems like a good time to push the pawns, right? Doesn't really matter which one. H2 or G2, same idea is going to be applied. We're going to actually, before I tell you, what do you think we should play in this position? There's a nice little trick that we have. It's a little bit tricky to see, but go ahead if you like, pause and think through what can we play here. Well, if you're ready to see the solution, it's rook to d1 check. Now, what does this do? Well, it forces the king here, obviously. And why do we care about that? Because we want to play rook to h1, and this is a zugzwang. So again, we are forcing black to make a decision. We saw something similar to this in the other example. Black doesn't want to move their king because the only king move is here, which is checkmate for us, which means, oh, and by the way, this pawn is blockaded, which means black only has one move, push this g pawn. And guess what? Now we can take this one and look at this. Isn't that amazing? It's pinned, so black has to do something with the king, and then we take this next move. Pretty amazing stuff. I mean, this is just pretty cool. So that's our idea, right? That's our plan, by playing king to c3. If black pushes one of those pawns, that's what we're going to do. We're going to go check, and then we're going to slide over. Same thing if black pushes this pawn. Exact same concept. Check. We play here. We get the zugzwang. Black has to push the pawn. We take it, and this time it's a fork with check, and we win the pawn. Okay. So, but black's not out of tricks yet. They don't have to push the pawns. They can play king to c1. And now again, we're in a situation where there's only one winning move, and every other move is losing. So what do you think the winning move is? And then we'll talk about why that's the case. All right, if you had a chance to look at that, the winning move is rook to a2. Now, you might be wondering, why is rook a2 so much better than something like rook e2? They look very similar, right? Both moves threaten checkmate. So why is rook a2 better than e2? So first of all, let's look at this. What happens if we play rook to e2? The king's going to come over. We have to do something with our rook. And the problem now is, what do we do? I mean, we can come back over here, but then black's going to push a pawn, right? And get a queen, and we can't really stop it. We don't have any good plans, right? So how does that compare, coming back here, to rook to a2? Attacks our rook. What do we do now? Rook to e2. And I know there's a lot of jumping back and forth, but it has to do with the fact that we keep getting black into these zugzwang types of positions where they have to push a pawn when they don't want to. Okay, so what we did by sliding over there and then back to e2, check out black's king. If it moves here, it gets checkmated, right? Because of this little trick, which we've seen before. If it moves here, checkmated immediately, which means, again, black is forced to push a pawn, which they don't want to do, because why not? What are we going to do here? You've seen this before. You should know this one. Rook to e1 check. Force the king up. Come over here and blockade the pawn. And again, same kind of thing. Black doesn't want to move there and get checkmated. Have to push the pawn, right? We've seen this exact trick before. So basically, we force black into that trick. And that's why we can win. So this is a much more advanced endgame study, I would say. You know, you learn the general rule that, okay, 2 pawns on the 6th rank generally beat a rook. And then you see a position like this, and it's like, well, there's always exceptions to rules in chess. And this is a really good example of that. There's 2 examples here of how both cases, normally speaking, you're supposed to be able to win. In this case, white couldn't win. It was a draw. And then here, the pawns are supposed to be able to win, and they couldn't. They actually lost because of the way that the king and the rook were placed. So pretty amazing stuff. Congratulations if you guessed position number 2. And if not, don't feel bad. This is a very, very difficult one, but hopefully you learned some things about how rooks and kings work. And if nothing else, the takeaway from this should be that rook and pawn endgames are extremely complicated. Like, there is a lot more to these positions than first meets the eye. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you want to see more like this. But as always, stay sharp, play smart, and take care.